David Harlow was a man who had built his fortune from the ground up, earning his millions through shrewd investments and relentless dedication to his business empire. Living in his grand estate, surrounded by the finest luxuries money could buy, David's life appeared to be nothing short of perfect. His staff, which included his trusted and long-serving maid Maria, ran his household with seamless efficiency. Maria had worked for David for several years, becoming a fixture in his home and someone he relied on for the smooth operation of his day-to-day life. She was quiet but diligent, and David had always admired her work ethic. Lately, however, David had noticed that Maria wasn't quite herself. She seemed to move a little slower, her usual energy and attention to detail dulled by something she kept to herself. At first, David didn't think much of it. After all, people had personal issues they kept private. But soon it became too obvious to ignore. Maria started taking more time off than usual, often asking for days away without providing much explanation. She would occasionally excuse herself from her duties early, her face drawn and tired. David, though respectful of her privacy, grew concerned. It wasn't until he was going through some routine household paperwork that his suspicions truly started to rise. Among the bills and receipts for groceries, cleaning supplies, and other routine expenses, David came across several medical invoices. These bills weren't for him, nor did they belong to anyone else on his staff, except Maria. Her name was clearly printed on the top of each document, and the charges were from a local clinic. David couldn't shake the strange feeling that something serious was happening. He didn't pry into his employees' personal lives, but this was different. Maria had been with him for years, practically becoming a part of his extended family, and she had never hidden anything from him before. Why was she so secretive now? He stared at the bills for a long time, the wheels in his mind turning, wondering if Maria was sick or dealing with a more serious health issue. The next morning, David called Maria into his study. She came in, her usual calm demeanor slightly tense. David noticed the faint dark circles under her eyes, and the way she hesitated as she stepped forward, as if she was preparing herself for something. "Maria, please sit," David said, motioning to a chair across from him. She obeyed, quietly sitting down with her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "I've noticed you've been taking a lot of time off recently," David began carefully, "and I came across these medical bills while reviewing the household accounts." He paused, watching her reaction closely. "Is everything okay? Are you unwell? You know you can talk to me if something's wrong." Maria's face immediately flushed with embarrassment, and her hands gripped each other even tighter. She looked down at the floor, her usually composed expression faltering. David waited, giving her time to gather her thoughts. "Mr. Harlow," she started, her voice shaking slightly, I didn't mean to cause any concern. I've just had some personal matters to attend to." David leaned forward, his concern deepening. "Maria, you've been with me for a long time. If something is wrong, I need to know. If you're sick, I can help. You don't have to go through this alone." Maria's eyes filled with a mix of emotions, fear, guilt, and something David couldn't quite place. She took a deep breath, her fingers trembling slightly as she brushed a stray lock of hair behind her ear. "I'm not sick, Mr. Harlow," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm pregnant." The words hung in the air between them, and for a moment David didn't quite register what she had said. Pregnant? Maria was pregnant? The idea hit him like a tidal wave, crashing against his expectations. He sat back in his chair, blinking as if to clear the sudden fog in his mind. "You're pregnant?" he repeated, more as a confirmation to himself than a question to her. Maria nodded, her eyes still downcast, unable to meet his gaze. David's mind raced. This was completely unexpected. Maria had always been so private, never once mentioning a romantic relationship or any indication that she was seeing someone. But now, she was pregnant, and it was clear from her demeanor that this wasn't a planned or easy situation for her. The suddenness of it all left David at a loss for words. "How far along are you?" he asked after a long pause, his voice gentle. 4 months, Maria answered, finally looking up at him, though her face was still lined with anxiety. "I know I should have told you sooner, but I didn't know how. I was scared and I didn't want to lose my job." David rubbed his forehead, trying to process the news. He wasn't angry. How could he be? But he was deeply confused, unsure of how to navigate this unexpected development. Maria had been a trusted part of his household for so long, and now this revelation added a layer of complexity to their professional relationship. "Maria, you've worked for me for years. You know that I respect you and everything you do for this household. I'm not going to fire you for being pregnant," David said, trying to reassure her. "But I do need to understand the situation. Who is the father?" The question hung heavily in the air, and for a brief moment, Maria's expression changed from fear to something closer to panic. She opened her mouth as if to respond, then closed it again, her hands fidgeting nervously in her lap. It was clear that this was the part she had dreaded the most. David watched her closely, his brow furrowing as he realized she wasn't just hiding her pregnancy. She was hiding something much bigger. "Maria," he prompted gently, "I need to know. Who is the father of your child?" The silence stretched out between them, each second adding weight to the tension in the room. Maria seemed to struggle internally, torn between her loyalty to the family she worked for and the personal situation she now found herself in. Finally, she took a deep breath, her eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and guilt. I can't tell you, not yet," she whispered, her voice trembling. David's heart sank. Whatever this was, it wasn't just a simple situation. Maria's reluctance to reveal the truth told him that there was much more to the story than he had anticipated. The weight of the unknown pressed down on him, leaving him feeling both unsettled and strangely protective of Maria, even as his mind spun with unanswered questions. Who was the father of her child? And why was she so afraid to reveal his identity? In the days following his confrontation with Maria, David felt like he was walking through a fog. The revelation of her pregnancy weighed heavily on him, not only because it affected his household, but also due to the swirling emotions he couldn't quite pinpoint. He felt a profound sense of responsibility for Maria and the unborn child, but his mind was clouded with questions about how this had happened. Who was the father? Why was she so reluctant to share that information? Desperate for clarity, David decided to confide in his younger brother, Michael, who had always been his sounding board during challenging times. Michael had a carefree spirit, often living life with a certain nonchalance that sometimes frustrated David, but they shared a close bond. David hoped that Michael would offer a fresh perspective on the situation, perhaps guiding him toward a solution, or at least helping him make sense of it all. When David invited Michael over for dinner that Friday evening, he felt a mix of apprehension and relief. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow through the grand windows of the estate, David set the dining table with his best china, hoping to create a welcoming atmosphere. Michael arrived, a broad grin plastered on his face, completely unaware of the storm brewing in David's heart. "Hey, brother, what's with the fancy setup?" Michael exclaimed, admiring the lavish spread of food David had prepared. His brother had a knack for bringing a lighthearted energy to any situation, and David was grateful for it. "Looks like you're trying to impress someone." David managed a small smile, though he was far from feeling festive. "Just thought we could use a nice dinner together. I have something important to discuss with you." Michael raised an eyebrow, curiosity flickering in his eyes. "Oh, sounds serious. Is it business or personal?" "Personal," David replied, leading Michael to the dining table where they both sat down. As they began to eat, the initial light banter faded, and David felt the weight of his words hanging in the air. "Michael, I've noticed something troubling lately," David began, choosing his words carefully. "Maria, the maid, has been acting strange. She's been taking a lot of time off and recently revealed that she's pregnant." Michael paused mid-bite, his fork hovering in the air. "Oh, wow. I didn't know that. Is she okay?" "I think so, but she didn't tell me who the father is," David continued, studying his brother's reaction closely. "And that's what I'm struggling with. I feel responsible for her, for the child, but I can't help but wonder how this happened right under my nose." Michael remained silent for a moment, his expression shifting. "That's definitely a surprise, man, but you said she didn't tell you who the father is?" "No, and it's really bothering me," David admitted. "I've been thinking about it nonstop. The more I reflect, the more I wonder how much I really know about the people who work for me." As the conversation progressed, David couldn't shake the feeling that there was something off about Michael's demeanor. He had known his brother for years, and while Michael was usually quick to share his opinions and stories, tonight he was unusually quiet. David watched as Michael's eyes darted to his plate, seemingly lost in thought. Maybe she just doesn't want to talk about it, Michael suggested finally, though his tone lacked conviction. It's a big thing for her and she might be scared, but you should definitely talk to her again. She might open up more. David nodded, though he sensed that Michael's advice was only scratching the surface. The unease in his brother's demeanor nagged at him. You're right. I'll try talking to her again, but I can't help feeling like there's more to this story. I need to get to the bottom of it. Over the next few days, David found himself oscillating between his feelings of concern for Maria and a growing curiosity about the father of her child. He couldn't shake the feeling that the answer was closer than he realized. One evening, he decided to take a different approach. Instead of pressuring Maria to reveal the father, he would simply get to know her better. He would show her kindness and support, creating an environment where she felt comfortable enough to share her truth. When Maria returned from her day off, David called her into the study again, this time with a different intention. He greeted her warmly, hoping to ease some of the tension from their previous conversation. Maria, I wanted to check in on you. I know things have been a bit overwhelming, and I just want you to know that I'm here for you, he said, gesturing for her to sit down. Maria looked surprised but grateful. Thank you, Mr. Harlow, I appreciate it. I just want to do my job and not be a burden. You're not a burden, Maria. You've been a valuable part of this household for years, David reassured her. I want to help you through this. If you're comfortable, I'd love to hear about how you're feeling. No pressure, just a conversation between friends. To David's relief, Maria began to open up a bit, sharing her fears about becoming a mother and the challenges that lay ahead. The more they talked, the more David understood her situation, but she still avoided mentioning the father. As their conversation unfolded, David's mind began to wander. He couldn't help but think about the events of the past few months, the way Michael had reacted to the news. The unease he felt was becoming a knot in his stomach, and he wondered if there was something deeper at play. One evening, after another long day of work, David sat in his office trying to make sense of everything. He glanced at the family portrait on his desk, a picture of him and Michael taken years ago during a summer getaway. They looked carefree, the bond between them evident. But now a distance had crept into their relationship, an unspoken tension that hung like a dark cloud. Unable to shake his thoughts, David decided to call Michael again, seeking clarity from the one person who might have insight into the matter. He dialed his brother's number, trying to keep his tone casual. Hey, David, what's up? Michael's voice came through the phone, upbeat as always. Michael, can we talk? I feel like I need to understand more about what's going on with Maria, David replied, his heart racing. Sure, man. What's on your mind? As they spoke, David noticed how evasive Michael seemed. When he brought up Maria, Michael's voice changed, becoming almost too cheerful, too dismissive. Oh, she's just a maid, right? Just a situation that will resolve itself. You shouldn't worry too much about it. But David could hear the undertones in Michael's words. Why was he being so dismissive? David's instincts told him that something deeper lay beneath the surface, something that Michael wasn't ready to face. He felt a mix of frustration and concern for his brother, knowing how much he cared about family and how protective he could be, yet also sensing that Michael had something he was hiding. After their conversation ended, David sat in silence, reflecting on his brother's reactions. It all began to click into place. The more he thought about it, the more he realized that Michael had a tendency to avoid uncomfortable truths. It was almost as if he was scared to confront them. Feeling increasingly uneasy, David decided he needed to gather more information. He turned his attention back to Maria, determined to support her, but also to discover the truth. The questions gnawed at him. Who was the father? And why was Michael acting so strangely? With resolve, David planned to speak to Maria again, hoping that the bond they had developed could pave the way for honesty. He wanted to protect her, but more than that, he wanted to protect his family from any further turmoil that could arise from this situation. The stakes felt higher than ever, and as he laid his head down that night, sleep eluded him, his mind filled with questions about love, loyalty, and the complexities of family. The tension in the Harlow household had reached a boiling point, and David felt it in every corner of the expansive estate. With each passing day, he found himself increasingly consumed by the enigma of Maria's pregnancy and the looming question of who the father was. After his recent conversation with Michael, He could no longer ignore the nagging feeling that his brother was involved in this delicate situation. Determined to uncover the truth, David approached the issue with a heavy heart, but a clear resolve. He knew he needed to confront Michael directly. The bond they had as brothers was strong, but that bond was now tested by secrets and half-truths. David felt a mixture of anger and disappointment, not just towards Michael for his perceived betrayal, but also for the emotional turmoil that had seeped into their once harmonious relationship. The following evening, David invited Michael over for what he presented as a casual dinner. He hoped to create an environment conducive to a candid conversation. As he prepared the meal in the kitchen, he steeled himself for the confrontation that lay ahead. David's mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. Could he maintain his composure when the time came to confront Michael? Would he be able to keep his anger in check? When Michael arrived, David greeted him with a forced smile, suppressing the frustration bubbling beneath the surface. They sat down for dinner, the meal consisting of roasted chicken and seasonal vegetables, a recipe David had perfected over the years. Yet despite the delightful aroma wafting through the air, both brothers could feel the weight of the conversation that loomed ahead. "So, what's on your mind?" Michael asked, taking a bite of his food. He seemed relaxed, but David couldn't ignore the tension in his own shoulders, which felt taut as a bowstring. "Michael, we need to talk about Maria," David said, his voice steady but firm. Michael's fork paused midway to his mouth, and he looked up, a flicker of something unreadable passing over his features. "What about her?" "She's pregnant," David stated, his tone leaving no room for ambiguity. "And I need to know who the father is." The silence that followed was heavy, as if the air had thickened with unspoken words. David's heart raced as he watched Michael's expression shift from surprise to discomfort. I don't know, David. I mean, how would I know something like that?" David leaned forward, scrutinizing his brother's face for any sign of truth. "Michael, I can see it in your eyes. You're lying. I know you know something. You've been acting strange ever since I found out about her pregnancy. It's not like you to avoid the topic." "Come on, man," Michael said, his voice rising slightly. "You're overreacting. It's not my place to get involved in Maria's personal life. She's a good worker, and that's all I care about." "Is that really all you care about?" David pressed, feeling the anger start to bubble up. "You think I don't know you well enough to see that you're hiding something? Maria is not just a good worker. She's part of this family. If she's in trouble, I need to know how to help her. You need to step up and take responsibility." "Responsibility? What does that even mean in this context?" Michael shot back, his voice tinged with frustration. "You're making it sound like I have some sort of obligation to fix this, but I don't. She's an adult, David. She can handle her own problems." "Except she can't, Michael," David replied, his voice calm but firm. "She's pregnant, and whatever happens next will affect us all. Don't you care about what happens to her or the baby?" Michael looked away, his expression suddenly distant. It was a momentary crack in his facade, and David seized the opportunity. "You do care, don't you? You've been avoiding the truth because it's too painful to face. Is it because you care for her? Because you've been with her?" The accusation hung in the air, and for a moment silence enveloped them both. Michael's face paled, and David felt a pang of guilt for the hurt he had inflicted. "If you're involved with her, you need to tell me. This isn't just about you anymore." Finally, Michael sighed deeply, his shoulders sagging as if the weight of the world had fallen on them. "I never meant for any of this to happen," he said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. "Maria and we've been seeing each other for months. I love her, David." David's heart sank as the truth flooded in. The pieces of the puzzle he had been trying to assemble suddenly clicked together, and he felt a tumult of emotions surge within him. Shock, anger, and an unexpected sense of betrayal all collided in his chest. "You love her?" he echoed, struggling to process what he was hearing. "And you never thought to tell me? You let me walk around in confusion while you were having a relationship with her?" "I was going to tell you," Michael pleaded, his voice shaky. "But I didn't know how. I was scared of how you would react. I didn't want to ruin our relationship." David shook his head, disbelief coursing through him. "Ruin our relationship? Michael, you've already done that by keeping this a secret. You know how much I trust you, and you've shattered that trust. Not only did you betray me, but you also put Maria in a precarious position. She deserves better than this." "I never wanted to hurt anyone," Michael insisted, his voice rising with emotion. "I love her. I wanted to be there for her, but I didn't know how to approach you without causing a rift. You're my brother. I didn't want to choose between you and her." "Choosing is not the point," David countered, his frustration palpable. "You didn't give me a choice in the matter. You put me in a position where I had to find out the truth on my own, and it's tearing me apart. How can I trust you now?" Michael's expression faltered, and David could see the conflict churning within him. "I thought I was protecting you," he said, voice breaking. "I thought if I kept it to myself, it would spare you the pain. I didn't think you would take it this hard." As the weight of the revelation settled, David realized that the conversation was shifting into dangerous territory. He needed to be careful about the words he chose. He didn't want to sever their bond entirely, but he also couldn't allow Michael's actions to go unaddressed. "Protecting me?" David replied incredulously. "You were only protecting yourself. You let this go on without any regard for the consequences. Maria is pregnant, and now we have to deal with this situation together. You may love her, but love isn't enough to fix the mess that has been created here." The silence that followed felt suffocating, and both brothers sat in the weight of the reality they faced. David's heart ached for Maria, but it also ached for the brother he once knew. How had things spiraled so far out of control? Michael finally spoke, his voice filled with resignation. "I know I've made mistakes, David. I'm willing to take responsibility for my actions. I want to be there for Maria and the baby. But I also want to make things right with you. I never wanted to hurt you. I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive me." David looked at his brother, the hurt still fresh but tinged with a flicker of understanding. "Michael, forgiveness isn't something that happens overnight. It will take time, and it will require a lot of work from both of us. But right now we need to focus on Maria. She deserves our support, and that needs to be our priority." Michael nodded, his expression earnest. "You're right. I'll do whatever it takes to make things right with her and with you. I love her, and I want to be a part of this child's life." David felt a swell of emotions, hope mixed with the uncertainty of the future. "Let's go talk to her together. She deserves to know that she has our support, that she's not alone in this." As they both stood, the brothers found a moment of unity in their shared goal. They were stepping into the unknown together, facing a situation that had the potential to change their family dynamics forever. David knew it wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in days he felt a sense of purpose. They would navigate this challenge side by side, and hopefully emerge stronger on the other side. As they left the dining room, David's mind raced with thoughts about what lay ahead. They would need to address Maria's fears, her concerns about the future, and the undeniable bond that had formed between Michael and her. It would require patience and understanding, but David felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps this could be a new beginning for all three of them, a chance to rebuild trust and embrace a future that, while uncertain, held the promise of love and family. The sun dipped low on the horizon as David and Michael approached Maria's small apartment, a cozy yet modest space tucked away from the grandeur of the Harlow estate. It was a strange juxtaposition, and as David stood at the threshold, he felt an unsettling mix of anxiety and determination. They had come to address the complexities that had woven their lives together in unexpected ways, and he knew that this conversation could change everything. David knocked gently on the door, glancing sideways at Michael, whose face was a mask of apprehension. This was their chance to set things right, to show Maria that she wouldn't have to face this alone. A few moments later, the door creaked open and Maria stood before them, her expression a blend of surprise and trepidation. She wore a simple sundress, a stark contrast to the heavy emotions swirling around them. "Mr. Harlow, Michael," she said softly, her eyes darting between them. "What brings you here?" David took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. "Maria, may we come in? We need to talk." She hesitated for a brief moment, but then stepped aside, allowing them to enter. The apartment was small but welcoming, filled with the scents of freshly baked bread and herbs. A small table in the corner held a vase of wildflowers, bringing a touch of color and life to the space. David marveled at how such a simple environment could evoke warmth, yet it also highlighted the emotional storm brewing within. "Please sit down," Maria offered, her voice barely above a whisper. They took seats on the modest couch, and she settled across from them, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The atmosphere crackled with tension, and David could sense her unease. "Maria, we wanted to come and talk to you about the pregnancy," David began, keeping his tone gentle but firm. "I know this is a lot to deal with, and I want you to know that you're not alone in this." Maria's eyes widened slightly, and she nodded, her breath hitching. I appreciate that. I just didn't know how to approach either of you. I didn't want to cause any more trouble." "Trouble?" Michael interjected, his voice softer than before. "This isn't trouble, Maria. This is a new chapter in our lives. We're here to support you, not to judge or criticize." A flicker of gratitude crossed Maria's face, but it was quickly overshadowed by the shadows of doubt and fear. "I've been so scared," she admitted, her voice trembling. "I didn't plan for this to happen, and now everything feels so uncertain." David leaned forward, his heart aching for her. "I can only imagine how overwhelming this must be. But I want you to know that we'll help you figure things out. You don't have to face this alone." "But what about my job?" Maria asked, her eyes brimming with tears. "I can't work forever. I won't be able to care for a baby and keep my job as a maid." "Your job is the least of my concerns right now," David replied firmly. "What matters is you and the child. We can find a way to make this work. You have options, and we can explore them together." Michael nodded in agreement. "We're committed to being there for you. I want to be a father to this child, and I'll do everything I can to support you both." Maria looked between the two of them, her emotions clearly written on her face. "But how can you be sure?" she asked, doubt creeping into her tone. "This is such a huge responsibility. What if you change your mind later?" David felt a surge of protectiveness. "This isn't just a phase for us, Maria. This is a life we're talking about. You've worked hard, and I have deep respect for you. You're not just our maid. You're part of this family now." Michael shifted in his seat, leaning closer to Maria. "I know I messed up by keeping my relationship with you a secret, but I promise I will be there for you and our child. You mean so much to me, and I want us to figure this out together." Tears spilled down Maria's cheeks, and David felt a knot form in his throat. It was painful to see her so vulnerable, yet there was also a sense of relief in the room, as if they were all beginning to grasp the enormity of what lay ahead. "I never wanted to complicate things," Maria said, her voice breaking. "I just wanted to do my job and be good at it. But now I feel like everything is falling apart." David reached out, placing a reassuring hand on hers. "You're not falling apart, Maria. You're just facing a challenge, and we're here to help you through it. We'll figure it out together, step by step." "I don't want to be a burden," Maria whispered, her eyes searching theirs for understanding. "You could never be a burden," Michael assured her, his expression earnest. "You are strong, and you've faced so much already. This child is a blessing, and together, we'll navigate this journey." As Maria processed their words, David could see a flicker of hope begin to take root in her eyes. It was a fragile glimmer, but it was there, shining against the backdrop of fear and uncertainty. "Can we talk about what comes next?" Maria asked, her voice steadier now. "I need to know my options and what I can do." David nodded, grateful for her willingness to engage in the conversation. "Absolutely. There are resources we can explore together. We can find counseling, prenatal care, and even look into parenting classes if you want. You have the support of both of us, and we'll make sure you're never alone in this." Maria took a deep breath, visibly relaxing as the weight of the situation began to shift. "I've thought about how I might handle things, but I didn't want to impose on either of you. I thought I could just figure it out on my own." "Thinking you have to do this alone is a common feeling," David said gently. "But you don't have to. We're a team now, whether we like it or not. We need to communicate openly about everything, especially as we navigate this new dynamic." Michael's eyes softened, filled with a mixture of love and determination. "We're in this together, Maria. I want to be involved in this child's life, and I will do everything I can to support you." For the first time, David saw a genuine smile flicker across Maria's face. It was a small gesture, but it felt monumental, a step toward healing and acceptance. "Thank you both. This means more than you know," she said, her voice thick with emotion. As they continued to talk, David felt the tension in the room ease further. They discussed the practical aspects of preparing for the baby, what resources were available, how they could support Maria emotionally, and even the logistics of her future work situation. David offered to set up a meeting with a local counselor who specialized in pregnancy and parenting. "You deserve all the support available to you," he said, watching Maria absorb his words. "And when you're ready, we can look into discussing your role here at the estate. There's no rush. We'll take it one day at a time." Maria nodded, her expression contemplative. "I appreciate that, Mr. Harlow. I just want to make sure I'm making the right decisions for the baby." "Your instincts will guide you," David replied, feeling a surge of pride in her strength. "And you won't be making those decisions alone. We'll be here every step of the way." As the evening wore on, the three of them began to bond in a way that felt profound. The weight of the situation was still there, but they were navigating it together, and it forged a sense of unity that David hadn't anticipated. Michael and Maria exchanged stories, laughter punctuating the gravity of their conversation. David felt a warmth in his heart, grateful to see Michael in a new light, as a man committed to stepping up for the family they were about to create. Eventually, as the conversation shifted toward lighter topics, David realized they were making progress not just as individuals, but as a new family unit. The fear and uncertainty that had gripped them earlier seemed to dissolve, replaced by a tentative optimism for the future. As the evening came to a close, David knew they had crossed a threshold. They weren't just colleagues or even friends. They were now bound together by love, responsibility, and the promise of a new beginning. Standing at the door, Maria hugged both brothers tightly, and in that moment David felt a profound sense of hope. They were embarking on a journey filled with unknowns, but as long as they stood together, he believed they could face whatever challenges lay ahead. As he left Maria's apartment, David cast a glance at Michael, who wore a hopeful smile. The bond between them had been tested, but now it was fortified by a shared commitment to love and family. In the days to come, they would undoubtedly encounter obstacles and difficult decisions. But for now, they had forged a path forward, a united front ready to embrace the challenges and joys of the new life that was waiting just around the corner. As the weeks unfolded, the atmosphere in the Harlow household shifted dramatically. What had once been a space filled with tension and uncertainty now brimmed with a sense of anticipation and newfound purpose. David, Michael, and Maria had committed themselves to navigate the complexities of impending parenthood together, and it was a journey that brought them closer than ever. David found himself increasingly involved in Maria's care, not just as a supportive employer but as a friend. They established a routine that included regular check-ins to discuss her health and well-being. David was determined to ensure that Maria felt comfortable and secure during this pivotal time. He arranged for her to receive comprehensive prenatal care at a nearby clinic and scheduled appointments for counseling, knowing that emotional support was just as important as medical attention. Each time they met, David was struck by Maria's resilience. Initially nervous about the challenges ahead, she began to exude a quiet strength that inspired him. They shared conversations about the future, discussing everything from nursery themes to parenting philosophies. David loved seeing her smile as she talked about her dreams for the baby, imagining the child's first steps, their first words, and the laughter that would fill their lives. Michael also stepped up in significant ways. He took on the role of a committed partner, attending doctor's appointments and accompanying Maria to her counseling sessions. He was dedicated to being present, wanting to show both her and David that he was taking responsibility for his actions. It was a side of Michael that David had never seen before, a depth of commitment that changed the way he viewed his brother. One afternoon, David found himself in the nursery, a space that had gradually transformed from a spare room into a vibrant haven. He had dedicated himself to preparing the room for Maria and the baby, painting the walls a soft shade of pastel and assembling furniture that felt warm and inviting. Each stroke of the brush and every piece of furniture he assembled seemed to fill the space with hope and anticipation. As he stepped back to admire his handiwork, Maria walked in, her eyes widening with delight. "David, it looks incredible. I can't believe how much you've done." "It's a team effort," he replied with a smile, feeling a swell of pride. "You're going to be an amazing mother, and this little one deserves a beautiful space to grow up in." Maria's face lit up, and for a moment the worries of the outside world faded away. She stepped closer, placing her hand on her growing belly. "Thank you for believing in me. It means more than you know." Just then, Michael entered the room, a bouquet of flowers in hand. "I thought I'd bring a little cheer," he said, presenting the flowers to Maria with a flourish. "These are for you, to remind you how wonderful you are." Her cheeks flushed with happiness as she accepted the bouquet, her heart swelling with appreciation for the support she had received from both men. "You guys are too much," she laughed, her eyes sparkling. "I don't deserve all this." "Of course you do," Michael replied, stepping closer to her. "You're carrying our child. You deserve the world, Maria." As they stood in the nursery, a palpable sense of love filled the air. David felt a shift within himself, a realization that this situation had transformed them all. They were no longer just a millionaire and his maid. They had become a family in the truest sense. They were learning to communicate openly, to support one another, and to embrace the love that had blossomed in the most unexpected way. As the months progressed, David witnessed the evolution of their unique family dynamic. They attended prenatal classes together, learning the ins and outs of childbirth and parenting. David often found himself sitting in those classes surrounded by couples, but he felt an overwhelming sense of pride in his unconventional family. He marveled at the way Maria and Michael interacted, their shared love evident in the gentle way they communicated. During one class, the instructor led a discussion about parenting styles. Maria and Michael exchanged glances, and David could see the unspoken connection between them. When the instructor asked for volunteers to demonstrate different parenting techniques, Maria stood up with a nervous smile. "I'll give it a shot." As she walked to the front of the room, David couldn't help but feel a swell of admiration. She carried herself with grace and determination, her confidence blossoming with each passing day. Michael stood at the back, beaming with pride, and David felt a warmth spreading through his chest. This was not just about the child. It was about the growth of their relationships, the forging of new bonds, and the commitment to support one another. Later that evening, as they sat together in the living room of the Harlow estate, Michael turned to David, a serious expression on his face. "I've been thinking a lot about the future," he began. "I want to make sure we're all on the same page when the baby arrives." David nodded, recognizing the importance of having this conversation. "What do you have in mind?" "I want us to create a plan for how we're going to raise the child together," Michael said, his tone earnest. "I don't want to make assumptions. We need to discuss everything from education to values to what our family life will look like." Maria listened attentively, her expression thoughtful. "I agree. We should definitely outline our goals and expectations as a family. It's important that we're united in our approach." David felt a surge of gratitude for their willingness to communicate openly. "That's a great idea. We can meet regularly to discuss our plans and any changes we might want to make along the way. This is a partnership, and I want us to be transparent with each other." As the evening wore on, they began to draft a list of priorities for their family. They talked about the kind of education they wanted for the baby, the values they hoped to instill, and even the traditions they envisioned celebrating together. Each idea they shared brought them closer, solidifying the bond that had formed in the face of adversity. One night, as they sat in the nursery reflecting on their discussions, Maria voiced her concerns. "What if we face challenges? What if we disagree on something important?" "Challenges are part of any family dynamic," David replied, his voice steady. "What matters is how we handle those challenges. We need to promise to communicate openly and work through disagreements together." "I want to be open and honest about everything," Michael added, his gaze shifting to Maria. "We need to support each other through the tough times. If we face challenges, we'll tackle them as a family." With their commitments laid out, the trio began to feel a sense of security in their arrangement. They weren't just coexisting, they were actively building a life together. As the weeks turned into months, the day of the baby's arrival grew nearer. David felt the excitement bubbling within him as he accompanied Maria to her final prenatal appointments. Each visit brought a sense of anticipation, and as he watched Maria preparing for motherhood, he marveled at how far they had come. The evening before the baby was due, David gathered both Maria and Michael in the nursery. The room had transformed into a cozy haven, complete with a crib, soft blankets, and an array of baby clothes. He could feel the excitement radiating from Maria, her eyes shining with a mix of nerves and joy. "I can't believe tomorrow is the day," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "I feel so ready. yet so scared. David placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. It's completely normal to feel that way. Just remember, you're not alone. We're all in this together, and we'll support you every step of the way. Michael nodded in agreement. You're going to be an amazing mom, Maria, and we'll be right there beside you. They spent the evening discussing their hopes and dreams for the baby, sharing stories of their own childhoods and the lessons they had learned along the way. The bond they had formed felt unbreakable, and as the night wore on, they settled into a comfortable camaraderie filled with laughter and warmth. As the sun began to rise the following day, the excitement in the air was palpable. Maria's contractions started early in the morning, and she felt a surge of adrenaline as she and Michael prepared for the journey to the hospital. David felt a mix of emotions, nerves, excitement, and an overwhelming sense of love for the family they had created. In the hospital, the atmosphere was electric with anticipation. David stayed close to Maria, offering her support as she navigated the intense waves of labor. Michael remained by her side, holding her hand and whispering words of encouragement. The bond they had forged was evident as they worked together, navigating the intensity of the moment with love and support. Hours passed, and just as the sun began to set, Maria finally held their baby in her arms. A beautiful little girl, healthy and radiant. Tears streamed down her face as she looked at her daughter, a mixture of joy and disbelief washing over her. "Welcome to the world, little one," David whispered, his heart swelling with emotion. "You are so loved." Michael leaned in, awe written across his face. "I can't believe we did it, Maria. She's perfect." In that moment, all the struggles, the doubts, and the fears melted away. They had become a family, bound not just by circumstance but by love, commitment, and shared dreams. As they stood together, gazing at the precious new life in Maria's arms, David felt a profound sense of gratitude for the journey they had embarked on. From that day forward, the Harlow family was forever changed. They would face challenges, joys, and everything in between, but they had forged an unbreakable bond, a promise to support one another, to love one another, and to embrace the beautiful chaos of life together. In the heart of their home, they had built a family defined not by traditional norms but by love, understanding, and a shared vision for a future that was bright and full of possibilities.